that conform. And obviously there's been a development pattern. We do look at the land uses that are in the area. Granted, some of them were approved by use variance, but I think it's no different than other studies that have been done by other planners, namely Mr. Burgess himself. So I have some re-examinations that I re-examined from other communities, including this one. And I saw no traffic studies referenced in any of those documents.
You're not suggesting that because somebody else hasn't done a traffic study that you should know?
No, no.
Okay. I have a question that you've raised, and maybe I'm not sure that I'm understanding it. If you're suggesting that construction that is in place is not going to be knocked down and rebuilt, why are you rezoning it? Why not leave the zoning to match what's there?
Because the zoning doesn't match what's there. That's the whole point.
No, I'm asking you why you are not suggesting that those lots be rezoned to match what's there rather than rezoning them to increase the density.
Because then what you're dealing with is spot zoning, and you're spot zoning every particular piece of property, which is effectively the use variance. And what we were trying to do is create a series of categories to assimilate the development that was happening and project it onto the properties that surround it, so it would be cohesive. So what you're talking about is spot zoning. Spot zoning every single property to what the use variance state it's the same thing. It would be an effort and futility to actually rezone the property then.
So in your professional opinion, it makes more sense to look at what Edgewater has decided is the best use for a particular property and have granted a variance so that that property can be developed as the way Edgewater thinks it should be developed, and that to give it a zoning as opposed to a variance is spot zoning, and it's better in your professional opinion to say, I know this building is 5 stories, but I think it makes more sense to rezone it to 40 stories. How does that make sense?
We haven't done that.
Okay. Have you left building, have you increased the densities of buildings that already exist?
Yes.
Okay. Have you increased the height
No,
of buildings
actually,
that already exist?
I'm sorry, that's actually a misstatement. We've increased the density for the zone, but we haven't increased the density of the building itself.
Okay.
And you did that because
Of the reasons I stated earlier. What we tried to do is create a few different zones, rather than obviously spot zoning, so that we could have not only these properties, but the properties that complement them or surrounding it would be a similar development so that we have cohesive development rather than the plethora of use variances that we seem to have gotten over the last number of years.
Then why didn't you take the properties on either side of the existing and conform them to the existing? Why take it and create a completely different zoning for the property next to it on either side, and then make everything different?
Because use variances were granted for each of these properties at FIRs that far exceed the ones that are permitted in our ordinance and or don't exist in our ordinance. So we thought that we should create an FAR, and also they do happen to exceed densities permitted in our ordinance. And there are a number of projects that have exceeded the densities, with the exception of the 110 dwelling units an acre. There are a number of properties that have exceeded the 30 dwelling units an acre for some time. So therefore, obviously our zoning was antiquated, it needed to be updated.
I don't think you understood my question. My question was, originally, why take a building that's developed pursuant to a variance to be 5 or 9 stories? Why increase that to 15, 20, or however many stories you have in these areas? And you said you didn't want to do spot zoning. So my question was, if you have a building that is under a variance for 9 stories, why not zone that building and the buildings adjacent to it to the 9 stories? why make all three of them or four of them different? When
You
you
have to give me a
already
specific
have an
example, because
existing.
that's too hypothetical of a question, which I don't know that it relates to this rezoning.
That's hypothetical?
Yes, you're not giving me a
Okay, tell
specific
me
example.
which building was existing and you changed the zoning? Give me an example of one of the buildings you changed the zoning.
Aventine.
Aventine. And what is Aventine?
It's a multifamily residential building of
And what
34
does it,
units.
that's fine. What is there now?
Right now, Aventine is zoned, I believe it was B2. Yep, it was zoned B2, and it's residential, so we initially recommended R4, and as I stated in my opening statement, I recommended it be changed to R5 was recommended, I recommended a change to R4.
What does R4 permit?
R4 permits mid-rise and apartment and townhouse dwellings.
Let's take a look. Aventine is block 88, lot 11. I don't see that on your chart.
Block 88,
Block 88 has 11.01 and 11.02, and Aventine is, according to your table, is 11, 12, and 13.
no, it's 11.02.
Okay, Aventine is block 88.
Lot 11.02.
Okay. Now, in your table 12 on page 19, it says Aventine is block 88 lots 11, 12, and 13.
Oh, we just found another error. That is 11.02 only.
I'm sorry?
The original project included all those block and lots, but then they were subdivided. And again, I was at a little bit of a disadvantage, as you all well know, because we don't have updated tax maps. And actually, I
I'm
just,
not criticizing you, Ms. Gregory. I'm trying to figure out what you're saying to me so I can follow you on your chart. You're saying that 11.02 is the Aventine?
that is correct. So table 12 needs to be updated.
That's
So
the
11.02,
Okay, and so you're suggesting it goes to R5?
R4.
So it shouldn't be R5, it should be R4.
Yes,
And under your new density, what would R4 allow?
it's not a new density, it's an existing zone.
R4 is an existing zone?
Yes,
Okay. And adjacent to 11.01, you said was eliminated?
yes.
And that is because shouldn't be R5, shouldn't be R4?
That is correct, it's zone B2, it shows on the map as B2, and it was included in the table, I think, because originally we thought it was part of the Aventine project, but as it turns out, because of the result of the subdivision, you all probably, at least the board knows, that that is now a daycare center. So that should remain in the B2 zoning,
What is on that property?
the daycare center.
Okay. So in this particular instance, you took into consideration what's existing on the property, and you suggested that it be rezoned to match what exists. You didn't want the daycare center changed, and so you wanted Aventine to become R4. Would that be consistent with 34 units?
Yes,
Okay. Can you have more units in an R4?
no,
Okay, so now I get back to my question where I'm totally confused, is why did you pick some properties that are already under variances and not do what you did here, which is just give it the zone to make it comply with what the variance is that was granted? Why did you change it?
because there are no zones, with the exception of the one section that allows 110 dwelling units an acre for age-restricted properties that allow greater than 30 dwelling units an acre. And there are a wealth of properties that have densities that are greater than that. So therefore, that's why we chose to change the zoning ordinance.
Okay. All right. Tell me, property that you suggested be rezoned that increase, with the new rezoning, increase the height or the density from what is? I'm sorry that I'm so amusing and that I've asked you silly questions. I'm just trying to
Counsel,
get
that's okay.
clarification.
Thank you, Counsel. You know something? You're asking a lot of questions. You're going back and forth with her. She's trying to give you an answer, so let's give her
I know,
time.
I just thought it was.
We've given you
rather-
more of time anytime you want to go back and look through your files. Give the young lady.
I'm not going through my files. This is her report that I'm
But
trying
you're
to
going back and
follow
forth.
her on.
Catherine?
Okay, now I forgot what the question is. I'm sorry. But, can you repeat the question, please?
Were there existing buildings that were existing pursuant to variances for which you recommended a zoning that either increased the height or increased the density?
Well, the answer is yes.
Okay, can you tell me which one? We went to Aventine and that was not exactly. I'm trying to understand why you made a statement, and I wasn't here, and I'll be the first one to admit that we didn't have the minutes, so I didn't know. You said Mr. Burgess gave numbers on densities as if the properties would be developed to their full capacity, and that can't happen because there are existing buildings that are less dense than what you provided. So I'm asking you which ones you chose to change the density or the height of if the building's already built.
Well, that's going to take a while for me to go through this and tell you specifically.
Okay, if you can't find it, you can't find it. I don't want to hold this board up all night. If I look at the existing zoning along the water, I have two questions about the water. Along the water, we have City Place, and I believe City Place is 31 units per acre. And then on the other side of it, along the water as well, we have I Park, and I believe I Park is 25 units per acre. Can you explain to me why the Quanta site between those two was 100 units per acre rather than bringing it into some kind of conformity with the existing properties on either side of it?
Because it's only residential and doesn't have any type of commercial component. Everyone's forgetting that there happens to be a commercial component on both the I Park and the City Place properties, which also relates to the FAR requirement.
So in this particular site, you decided that the transit-oriented development that the county recommends strongly for Edgewater to have commercial on the first floor and residential above it should not be applied to the Quanta site, and you just went to residential.
That is correct.
And so, in order to deal with that, you went to 100 units per acre because there's no commercial?
Yes. That's part of the reason.
What's the rest of the reason? I'm having a hard time understanding that one.
Probably because you weren't here at the last meeting. I talked about the fact that River Road no longer has any type of views to the water. And our incentive there is to create a taller, narrower building so that we can still have some vistas left along the River Road corridor. So we have a balancing of things. When we talk about transit-oriented development, we are talking about mixed uses, but we're also talking about densities that support that development. And given the fact that we do have a mixed community at City Place and a mixed community at I Park, we did think it was appropriate to have a high-density residential project to not only support the commercial development on either side, but also on the other side of River Road in terms of Shady Side and the like, and also support the approved ferry stop and open up those vistas. When you have commercial developments, you're going to have commercial developments at the first level. And so therefore, you would never have any vistas left. And that's one of the few properties that we have left where we can still maintain some vistas.
And this
So
would
those were a number of reasons as to why we rezoned that particular property R5.
And this would be an R5 zone?
Yes.
And what is it zoned right now?
OR1, excuse me, OR1.
What's the maximum height of an R5?
There is none.
There is no maximum height.
No.
So somebody could conceivably build a 50-story building on an R5 site?
Yes.
And it's your recommendation that the board should permit that kind of development in Edgewater?
Yes.
Your draft report on page 34, you're recommending that the riparian areas, on page number 7, paragraph 7, you're recommending that the water riparian areas be counted as the area of the land. Is that to allow the Quanta site to go up as even higher than 50 stories?
No, actually, it's the contemplation of what lot area is under the municipal land use law and the concept of density. There's case law to that effect that talks about the fact that you cannot exclude environmentally sensitive areas from an overall tract of land in calculating density. That's where that comes from.
So you're suggesting that an ordinance be adopted to say that the riparian areas along the Hudson River should be counted as acreage in determining the height of the building,
No, I'm not.
okay? The size of the building?
Was that a question?
Yeah, I'm saying, you're saying that the riparian areas should be considered as a part of the overall parcel of land. Now, this is along the Hudson River, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't the DEP control the development along the Hudson River?
Yes.
Okay. Does the DEP recommend that they be consulted before any development be placed along the river?
No, they
You
don't
have to
recommend that.
go through their process.
You have to go through approval.
Permitting process.
Yes, yes, you have to go through their approval process.
Now, I don't want to keep you unnecessarily longer, and I know that we got into the idea of the heights and the densities, and but I'm still uncertain from looking at all of your recommendations. And I understand your dispute with Mr. Burgess because he said that he overreached by doing maximum development. Based upon what you are recommending to this board, and assuming for your purposes that you believe that buildings that are built will not have stories added onto them or be knocked down and redeveloped, how many units are you recommending in this report to be added to Edgewater?
I'm not recommending any number.
What if you used your development scale? All of your development on your vacant properties and let's leave the properties that exist as they exist. What's the maximum number of units that can be developed in accordance with your new zoning for vacant properties?
I haven't done that analysis.
So you can't tell this board if you're recommending 4,000 new units be developed?
No,
You can't tell them if it's more than 4,000
no,
or less?
no.
Can you tell them, based upon your analysis, that the population, if, let's assume low, let's assume it's only 3,000 units. Do you assume one person per unit or two?
It depends on the type of unit. We have different types of bedroom units, so it depends on the type of unit.
You can have 1-bedroom units on up to 3-bedroom units.
Council, I want to stop the question, line of questioning here now, just because It is entirely, your line of question is entirely speculative, and you're asking the planner to speculate as to what a developer might come in to build on a vacant lot. Whether it's a one-bedroom, 50 one-bedroom units versus 52 bedroom units versus 53 bedroom units. You're asking her to put numbers to something that's purely,
Did not ask her to speculate. I said, based upon her recommendation to this board for zoning changes, what are the maximum number of units that could be built based upon her recommendation?
I agree with you there.
I'm not saying, let's go develop it, let's go put a park on the
no, but you just
corner.
asked her how many people, what the population increase in Edgewater is gonna be based upon a
Planners?
development that nobody has no idea.
Planners do that all the time. When they make recommendations for changing in zoning and they know, unlike here, but if they knew they were gonna have 100 three-bedroom units and they were gonna have 2,000 two-bedroom units and 1,000 one-bedroom units, they would come in and say to this board that based upon the mixtures, we can foresee that your maximum population increase at 1.5 persons per unit or 2 people per unit would be X. I'm asking her that. I've never heard a planner not say, if we're recommending a zoning change and we're saying we could put up all these units and we can put them as high as can be without limitations. I've never heard a planner not tell its board that you can expect, if maximum development follows, that you're going to see 3,000 new families in Edgewater. And if there's 3,000 new units in Edgewater, and we're projecting 1.5 or 2 people per unit. That's to let you know, because I think the board looks at this and this map, and it has development, and you see that it's going to be developed, and you're going to get more residential, and you have more commercial, and you have that. What could it be? And I know Mr. Burgess took all of the rezoning. He did. He took all of the rezoning, he took the buildings that exist right now, that are now being rezoned to R5 that has no height limitation. You have an existing building, you figure out the economics, you're an owner. You have a building that's 9 stories and now you can make it unlimited. Would you go to a bank and say, can I put another 4 floors on here? Can I put another 6 floors on here? So what Mr. Burgess did is what every planner does, is say, what is the maximum calculation that could be expected if everybody developed their property to the maximum proposal? And if that maximum number is too high, then you would expect the board to say to the planner, well, look, I understand why you want to make Quanta high, but can we look at these other lots? Can we get this down to a workable number so that we're not adding more than 1,000 new families, or we're not adding more than 2,000 new families? That exchange I haven't heard happen, and I don't have the minutes from the last meeting because the minutes weren't available.
No,
But
the minutes have not been approved yet, because you know as well as I do, you're an experienced land use attorney, the minutes have to be approved. Later this meeting, the minutes from the last meeting will be approved.
I had this conversation with you. I was surprised they weren't approved in March, but that's okay.
There was
I
no meeting in
understand.
March. You
All right,
can't
I
approve minutes
apologize.
if there's no meeting.
I apologize. I'm not trying to go over material that was already there. What I'm trying to do is ascertain, since it did come up last meeting, I know for a fact, because I spoke to Mr. Burgess and I spoke to my partner, Mr. Elias, was there any information given to this board from this board's professional planner that says, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if you take everything I've recommended, carte blanche, and you recommend to the mayor and council that they adopt it, you can conceivably see on vacant property 3,000 more units for which you can estimate 1.5 people, or 2 people, or 2 people and 1 child, and if the existing properties get redeveloped as well, because now owners can add floors or expand out, I don't, you know, depending on what they decide to do, because now their zoning is R5 and R5 has no height limit. What you could possibly see if everybody acted on the new zoning, then at that point in time, I would think the board would say, how many cars can we anticipate this many units with this many people ending up on River Road? So if the planner said to you, Mr. Chairman, if you took everything I have here, the most you're going to see is 2,000 units. And the most you're going to see if you have 2,000 units is 4,000 people. And I have the traffic studies from the state of New Jersey that says if you have 4,000 new people, you're only going to have 22 cars. Then you'd say, well, that's not going to affect River Road. But if the number of units, right, I'm being absurd, but there are state reports that tie in units and how many people with projected number of trips. It's a trip study. If somebody said to you, you're going to have 2,000, 3,000 more units, and you can expect that you're going to have between 5,000 and 6,000 people, and under the state standards on trip generation, you can expect that there will be 2,000 more cars on River Road every single day, then you can decide, gee, do we really want to recommend this or do we not care? 2,000 cars is 2,000 cars. It doesn't really matter. And get into what I think Mary, and I apologize, I don't know your last name, was saying is that you reach a tipping point where your conceptual development of transit-oriented development, where you have commercial on the first floor, becomes counterintuitive because you've now created so much traffic from how many units and how many people that people are not shopping in Edgewater. What you will end up with is multiple vacancies along Edgewater. Maybe iPark will survive because you can get off of River Road and you can go in there and maybe they'll have enough.
What about
parking.
Shadyside? Would Shadyside benefit from this?
I don't think that from having really big high-rises, I don't.
Having more density. Would they benefit? Would the state
I think that
benefit?
if you looked at Shadyside might benefit from commercial on the ground and might benefit
But it
from
wouldn't benefit.
residential, but I don't think that the densities that are recommended are in the best interest of getting the people on the street in the commercial development because they're going to get frustrated and they're going to get out of Edgewater as opposed to coming into Edgewater to shop, as opposed to using those units. They're not. And Mary's absolutely right. And you can see that in overdeveloped areas elsewhere in New Jersey is that they come in with this great plan and they do all this great development and then 6 months, 8 months, a year later, vacancy sign, because they can't afford the rents. They're not having the traffic, they're not having the pedestrians, they're not having the vehicular traffic because everybody is frustrated by the congestion. So what I was asking the planner is to tell me and tell the board how many units is she proposing in this report? And if she can tell you how many units, can she tell you the projected number of individuals who will be in those units? Because some units are one person, some are two, some are three kids. If you have 3-bedroom units, you can have 4 kids, 5 kids. In the olden days with the Italians and the Irish, we used to put 20 kids in one 3-bedroom house. But where is that information? I have read this report over and over and over again. I went to Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess said to me, if I calculate it out You're talking about 6,000 potential units. Now, will 6,000 be developed? Probably not. But will your planner tell us, will 4,000, is that a high probability? Is that a good possibility? Do you want to know how many people you're bringing into the town? How many people will be voting in the next election? Would you, or maybe the next 2 or 3 elections?